Hi there. I'm here with Kelly Gardner, and um, she was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. And I'm so excited that she could join us today and be here with me on this conversation about a topic we don't usually like to talk about, and that is um, fasting. What is it and why? Uh, and my daughter's been asking a lot of questions. She's in fourth grade now, and some of her friends are giving up things for Lent. And so she started off with asking me about, why do they give up things for Lent, and should I give up something for Lent, and what should I give up? And then been kind of looking a little bit at the history of that, which is interesting. And then yesterday she was saying, well, I have a friend who, doesn't eat during the day because of Ramadan, but then because he's a kid, he gets to choose. And so he's decided he's going to eat during the day and then he'll, fast in the evening in order to continue his practice that way. So she's been asking lots of questions, and all of that leads me to think, we're going into Holy Week. It is the season. And there's a lot of conversation about it in our wider culture as well. So, I hope that you can share with us your wisdom and your experience with this topic.
I would love to. Thanks for
Great.
having me.
Yeah. So you don't call it, my first experience, and with Kelly, well, I've had you as an instructor in YogaFit classes way back, but then during COVID, you were starting a season of Rising Strong
Mhm.
by Brene Brown. And I was like, that sounds really interesting and something that we all need right now, resilience. And we need to rise strong and stay strong. So I jumped into that group and started reading the book and learning a little bit about daily habits. And then we rolled around to a seasonal reset. And I was like, what is this? This is, you know, I remember people when I, lived out in the Southwest doing grapefruit fasting and cabbage soup fasting, and
Oh, yes.
like, that's not for me. So I got really curious, um, and especially with you, you call it a reset instead of
Mhm.
a fast or a cleanse. So, um, yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, thanks for asking. I do indeed call it a reset especially rather than a cleanse. I think because there are a lot of preconceived notions around what a cleanse is. Um, I have called it a cleanse. And when I've gotten a lot of questions around what products do you use? Do I have to not eat for a certain number of days? That kind of thing. So I wanted to get away from that word to get away from the ideas that people already had. And it's sometimes also referred to as a detox,
Mm.
which again, I don't really mind that term, but some people have specific ideas of, oh, hey, I did this juice cleanse or this sugar detox at one point, which it's really interesting because a juice cleanse would be, I'm only going to drink juices. A sugar detox would be, I'm detoxing from sugar. But so it can be confusing to know what to expect. And this all came about out of a sister science to yoga called Ayurveda. And Ayurveda is really that one word, Ayurveda, breaks down into basically the science of life. And so it's a lifestyle, and it's learning to support your body's rhythms so that your body can be in its healthiest state.
Mm.
And it's recommended that you do some sort of pause, cleanse, reset your system in some way twice a year.
Mm.
So, in the community that I lead, we do that in April and in October. So, it's typically going to be coming out of cold winter months in the transition toward warmer months, and then the opposite out of hot season and into cooler. And it really in some ways helps the digestive system to become more efficient, because in certain seasons, different seasons, we may build habits around how we eat and what we eat, which is a whole other discussion we could have. We should eat seasonally, ideally, because that's going to support our body's ability to absorb the nutrients, and the foods that are in season really help us with the symptoms and issues that you may have in a season.
Allergies and that type of thing.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Or even like in the fall, apples come into season in fall, and in your body, apples are great at helping to, it may sound a little odd, but to release built up heat from your system, from your tissues, like from summertime. So right now, as we're speaking, we're at the very end of March, going into warmer weather. And so this reset season is typically about letting go of excess that we've built up that has insulated us, if we're talking about the physical body, over the winter months. And so I call it a reset because it doesn't necessarily have to only pertain to food. So if we take a broader view, we can look at what food patterns we may want to reset, but also what thinking patterns, our daily patterns. We may have gotten into a season of being overscheduled or really busy, and maybe we want to create some space there. Or really what we're doing is assessing where we are and what we're doing, and then deciding how we want to move forward. So more than anything, I would say it really pertains to the element of space. So in Ayurveda, the theory is that everything that exists in our world is made up of 5 building blocks, 5 elements. And we're very familiar with 4 of them: earth, water, fire, and air. But in this sister science to yoga, we also recognize the element of space. And our culture kind of works against this element of space, having space in your day, having really space in your mind. That's where maybe meditation or prayer could come in. But if we are going to talk about the physical body and the digestive system and food, it also pertains to creating space there so that the body can digest. We want to optimize digestion in every way. Can we digest our thoughts and our experiences? Can we digest our emotions? Can we digest our food?
Yeah. So, next week is for some, for many, I guess, the season of Holy Week. And, there's some thought that it started, fasting in the Christian tradition started with, this preparation for Easter. And it was, just like a few days before the new initiate might be baptized, or the community might be preparing for their celebrations. And then it sort of expanded out, and it was the week before. And then, there was some thought that maybe that wasn't enough. Like we needed a longer period of time. And so we expanded it to more than just 40 hours to 40 days. Because of the significance of the number 40 in the scriptures, and other traditions do that as well. It's not just a couple of days; it's a season of time. How long does Ayurveda recommend for the reset? And how long do you do this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And
then if you think about those who talk about intermittent fasting,
right,
then is it a lifestyle? And what does that mean? And those kids who are giving up YouTube for Lent go, what? It's not a lifestyle. It can't be. I don't want to give up chocolate forever, or YouTube, or
not forever.
Our 4th graders are going to be,
I was kind of giggling too when you said, oh, we started with 40 hours and then no, we need longer. And the human mind always tends toward more is better.
Yeah, right? Isn't it
And
better if I work harder?
right, in this idea of finding our own rhythm, um, the recommendation is to find what's best for you and your system.
Hmm.
So the answer is almost always it depends. And as far as an Ayurvedic reset, detox, cleanse, it depends on who you ask as far as how long.
Hmm.
The average, I would say, is about 3 weeks. But some would also say, excuse me, 40 days.
Hmm.
So that number does come up in across cultures and across practices. But you'll also find some people who will do a 7-day reset. Now, when I say 3 weeks, which is what I'll typically teach and I'll typically practice, that includes a week of planning and preparing yourself, and then a week of really like, yep, this is the serious week of fasting from whatever it is. And then the third week is planning on how you're going to come out and what you want to bring with you, what you may want to add back in. So when I say 3 weeks, it's not, all right, none of that for 3 weeks, cold turkey kind of thing. And that tends to also make it easier, especially in the life that we're living. Life continues to go on. Even if I'm planning to do a cleanse or a reset, I still have to go to work. I still have my responsibilities. I still have people I'm responsible for. And so this is a way to make it a little more accessible and to be able to plan for what you do want to experience, what you do want to reset. And the mindset is also often one of, instead of just suffering through on what you have to give up, we really plan around, what do you want? What do you want to bring in? How do you want to feel? So it might be something, for example, and we'll get to intermittent fasting. But if we're not even talking about food, if you say, all right, well, at the end of this, I would really like to feel more rested. So then how can we plan for that? Are there things we can take off of the schedule for that? At least, 1 week, we're going to really focus on it. Can we plan for more periods of rest, more space in the day, setting ourselves up to be able to feel the way we want to feel? And so then when we focus on what we want to add in, what we want to let go more easily falls away. Now, when it comes to food and intermittent fasting and dieting and the diet, that too, you'll have many, many different answers from different people that you speak with. The easiest way to practice intermittent fasting is to use your nighttime when you're sleeping in your fasting window, your fasting hours. And so then you're asleep. You're not thinking about the fact that you're not eating. And you might add a few hours before you go to bed and a few hours after you go to bed, depending on the time frame. But like I said, if we're trying to work with our own body's rhythm and find what's best for us, some people and some bodies may be great with a 20-hour fast, or even, like, okay, I'm going to fast for 24 hours. And some bodies have great difficulty with that. So when someone is just beginning to explore intermittent fasting, I'll typically recommend starting with 13 hours of fasting. And so if we have a 24-hour clock, we're just going to pick out 13 hours out of that 24 when we're not going to eat. And so doing that overnight is helpful. Mm-hmm. And then we might, if we said, okay, well, I've got that, I eat at 5 o'clock in the evening, and I typically don't have anything to eat the next day till 7 a.m., we've already accomplished that. So then we may add on. 13 to 16 hours is a pretty good place to start. And then if it feels good to go longer, then that's okay too. There's also one other piece I want to add in. And again, you'll hear lots of different recommendations on this piece. But from the Ayurvedic standpoint, our digestion is at its peak performance. It's its strongest in the middle of the day. So we would always recommend fasting overnight, really. Like if you're going to eat, try to eat mostly in the middle of the day. One of the rules, even not even talking about fasting, is to honor your digestion by eating during daylight hours. Now, in the summer, that's much easier because the days are so long. But in the winter, that can get a little tricky. That might mean, oh, my last meal is at 4 p.m. But that's just really honoring when the digestive system knows to be on, because we all have internal clocks. I'm not
and
sure.
it might depend on where you live as well. And in more northern climate, you don't have as much daylight. And so you have to, right.
Absolutely. And so then too, we may be eating after the sun goes down, but then we can adjust how heavily we're eating later in the day. The middle of the day, lunchtime is typically when we would recommend. That's when you're going to have your biggest, heaviest meal. And that just supports the body's natural digestive rhythms. Did I answer your question? I'm not even sure what you asked me.
Yeah, no. I think, I mean, that really can be hard in our culture where lunch is sort of a meal people often skip and work through.
Yes.
Or, you know, the kids are at school and they're just eating a cold sandwich. You know, when we had free meals during COVID, the kids were all getting a nice hot meal. And now that's become debatable, how we maintain that, you know, because it's just not a normal part of our culture. Now that, you know, kids are in school all day and we're at work all day and we may or may not stop to eat. So that really changes a shift in our rhythm.
And in your thinking, that's a big piece of it. If we are talking about someone who goes to an office and works every day, it's not uncommon if I recommend, all right, we want to make lunch the biggest, heaviest meal, take your, you know, dinner that you've cooked, maybe you eat the leftovers for lunch the next day. It's not uncommon for me to hear something like, oh, well, I can't, I have to go to work. Okay, but when we really talk about it, then it's, well, I guess I could. We have a microwave. I mean, I eat other things there. So sometimes it is just assessing the thoughts or the beliefs around it too.
Yeah. And being comfortable with being perhaps different in how we eat our lunch than someone else, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I'm reminded in this whole conversation that yoga philosophy of brahmacharya, or non-excess. And how does that fit in, this idea of non-excess to your idea of resetting?
I think that definitely draws in the concept of space and creating space. And like we've said, some of our cultural influences don't support space in a lot of ways, right? Like you need more things. Oh, if you have more things, you'll feel happier. Let me fill the emotional void with something outside of me. So in a lot of ways, we're trained into excess, and we're constantly getting advertised to for any number of things at all times. And in all honesty, everyone is. Even if we're not watching a lot of TV or listening to a lot of radio, there are constant messages coming in. And some of it is very much based in scarcity. And not only that you can fill an inner void with things outside of yourself, but along with that can come the message that you need something other than just you to feel okay, or you're not enough in some way, what you're doing isn't enough. And so I love that you brought up this teaching of non-excess and that you've already mentioned being different, because some of these things may feel counterculture. It may feel like you're being a little bit of a rebel by, honoring what feels best for your body, for your mind, for your values and your ethics, your beliefs, that kind of thing. And so again, even this teaching of non-excess isn't you shouldn't have anything, it's so subjective. Find your version. There is no extreme needed. But again, just assessing the difference, I think, too, between need and want. Because we often want or desire comfort. But if we really get down to it and assess it, do I need this? That's a totally different story. Is it just a habit? So there's so many layers. Lots.
Yeah. Well, and I'm remembering you always saying in our group, something like baby steps, or,
Yes.
take a small bite, right? Like, because we think more is better, and we'll tend to go swing between one extreme and the other. And how do we, in this idea of creating space, start with something small first, and then build on that, right? And I think that's the hardest thing when we start, can be figuring out, okay, how can I break this down into steps?
Absolutely. Not only are we often taught more is better, but there can be thinking patterns that are also trained of all or nothing, right? And that may also go along with, well, if I can't do it perfectly, then I'm not even going to try. So there's that kind of all or nothing thinking as well. And sometimes people, perfectionism for sure. And sometimes people will come into, I have this ideal in my mind, and if it doesn't go perfectly, if I don't attain it exactly like I am envisioning, then it's a fail. Then I feel like a failure, then I'm a failure. There's a lot of things that we can take on about ourselves. And you're so right in that if we can start to practice, I'm going to start with one thing. Instead of, well, my list, I would love to reset 10 things, but let's start with one. We can always add more. And yes, baby steps. I teach this concept called Kaizen, which is a Japanese concept of small continuous change. And so it's taking those baby steps, one bite at a time kind of idea. But along with that, we also really need to practice the rule of B minus would also be what I would teach, which is I'm not aiming for perfection. And that needs to come with some compassion and some grace and really being our own friend through the process. There's an interesting link between our daily habits, what we do every day, and who we believe ourselves to be, our identity. When I first started learning about this concept, I was a little baffled by it. What do you mean? Like, what time I go to bed is going to impact who I think I am? That's weird. But it's very true. And an example that doesn't apply to me, but it seems like an easy example to grasp is someone who likes to run. So if you get up every morning and you run before you go through your day, most likely you identify as a runner. I'm a runner, right? And that's just a piece of identity based on what you do on a regular basis. Now, if we go back to the example of what time we go to bed, we can pull up that identity piece of, oh, I'm a night owl. So now we can start to see, oh, what I do regularly really does impact who I think I am, what I think about myself, and how I present myself to the world. And when we start to change something like that, and it impacts who we believe ourselves to be, there can be a lot of things that come along with that. There's going to be some emotion. There are going to be some thinking patterns. There's going to be some doubt. There's going to be some resistance. And so again, those little baby steps, let's start with one thing. Let's give ourselves permission to not have to be perfect. Let's experiment with it, try it on, see how it goes, see how we feel. And then we can always add something else later. And it's helpful too to have a accountability in some way, a partner who's doing it with you, a group, you know, someone else that you can say, hey, I did my thing. Did you do your thing?
Yeah. And that's what you are doing right now, right? You
Absolutely.
have transitioned from private practice.
Yes.
And you want to say a little bit about that and
Sure,
that
sure.
process and what, you know, what is life coaching or health coaching?
Such a great question. I am a non-practicing mental health therapist. So that all that means is that I do still hold my licensure, but I am not practicing in clinical settings. But I do have a background in clinical settings. And I transitioned from clinical work into life coaching, including health coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I would say the difference between therapy and life coaching would be that, and I do refer people to therapists when needed. Sometimes there is an issue that is diagnosable that may benefit from specific types of therapy, may benefit from seeing a psychiatrist. Maybe there are some medications that can help with symptoms, things like that. Those are clients that I would refer now to someone working in a clinical setting. And life coaching, health coaching as well, is very much future focused. What are your goals? Who do you want to become? And how are your thoughts getting in the way? What beliefs might you have that are keeping you stuck, keeping you out of, attaining the goals that you're setting? There's a lot of different things that I fold in from the realm of Ayurveda, like we've been talking about, but also yoga, breathing, resetting the nervous system, helping us feel safe in our bodies, goal setting, decision making. Let's look at the mindset and beliefs. So it's a lot. It's a lot in one bag.
Yeah.
And it's very
Lots to pull
much
together. Mm-hmm.
yes, and it's very much just supportive of who you really want to be, the life you want to live, and not having to figure it out on your own.
Yeah, having that person who's journeying with you, and just that accountability.
Absolutely.
And
Accountability. And I do one-on-one coaching, and then I do have a group program that I lead as well. And there's so much that happens in the group that I am witness to more than making happen, right? Just because of the dynamic of a group, learning from each other, support from each other, things like that. So, you see the same thing in any type of group, even if it's a support group, if it's a congregation, if it's, a yoga class. When people come together, there's a natural connection that happens, and we're wired for connection, as Brene Brown would say, and so it enables us to become better when we connect.
Yeah, I mean, there's that sense of energy that builds.
Yep.
When you bring people together, and when you can all kind of be your heart beating at the same rhythm, so to speak.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and that way of individual coherence with our own system and coming into wellness. And if you find that group that is supportive and has a similar goal or mindset, then you can build on one another's success and be there for each other when you need that encouragement and lift up.
And
Yeah.
in some ways, take that with you, even when you're not with the group, knowing the group is doing this same work.
Mhm.
So, there's support even when you're not physically present right then with the group. You can lean on that. Oh, they're doing it too. We're all doing this together. Yeah.
Well, and then your difference from maybe the other people in your household or at your workplace or in, um, it feels like less of a rub, perhaps.
Right,
That,
right.
do you think that's true?
Exactly. So even if you feel like you are rebelling against the norm, you're not the only one. Yeah, that's a really big piece as far as helping the nervous system feel safe as well.
Mhm.
That connection of someone else understands what I'm going through, understands my goals, understands me, is with me. Yes. Even if it's not who I live with or who I work with. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think sometimes that can be a real big, people talk about that's hard. I mean, I find that hard. If I'm trying to change my eating habits or change, when I go to sleep at night or any of those things, it really affects everyone around me.
Absolutely.
Not just my own identity of myself is no longer being a night owl.
Right.
Whatever it is, right? When we're trying to change that habit, sometimes setting up your environment for success can be a real challenge, and to
Oh,
have the
yes.
support of others is key. Yeah.
And on the other side of that as well, if you do have, the support in some realm, even if it's not in your home or your office, and you are able to continue to work toward these changes that you're wanting to make for yourself, they also can impact those around you in a positive way. They can impact your environment. They can, in some ways, draw the environment along with the rhythm you're creating.
Yeah.
There at times have been,
Hmm.
well, in my own personal experience with my husband, but also with others that I've worked with, feedback like, well, my partner doesn't want to make these changes. My partner doesn't want to do what I'm doing. And so it's the encouraging piece of, okay, you've got the group to cheer you on. You've got your coach to cheer you on. Do this for yourself first. And it's so funny. So often later down the road, the feedback comes in of, oh, well, my partner actually just kind of got on board at some point, just kind of came along. My environment changed to support what I was doing because I did keep going. I did keep doing it. So everything that we do to better ourselves impacts not only ourselves, but also everyone we're in contact with.
Now that reminds me of research around when we make a shift or a change, we can affect the energy, the change all around us. Whether
Absolutely.
it's negative or positive, right? If
Yep.
if we have a negative attitude about whatever situation we're in, that can kind of carry over into those around us. And if we start shifting our attitude, um, or what we're putting out there, a lot of research into gratitude is like if you know, it's positive psychology, right? That if you start looking for the positive, you see it kind of like, um, I didn't really see any red Mazdas out there until last summer. Mike needed a new car. We got a red Mazda, and now everywhere I turn, like every other block, there's a red Mazda, right?
Yes.
They were all there.
Yep.
We're not the only ones to have gotten a red Mazda, but um, but that there's those who research that, right? And tell us that it's kind of that you start looking for coherence. You start
It's a
looking for
frequency, right? Yeah, now we're talking
uh,
about frequency and energy. Absolutely. So you're right, whether it's a car that you've purchased that now you see everywhere, or even often you'll think, I just read a book on that and now I'm hearing the concept everywhere, or I just had this conversation with someone and it's popping up again, right? So everything is energy. And when we do shift our personal energy, whether through our thoughts or our habits, our physical energy through our exercise or how we're feeding our bodies. Um, it's that coherence, that resonance, like tuning forks, right? We start to draw to us other things of that same vibration. Yeah. Positive or negative. It can work either way.
Yeah. Um, there was something else I wanted to ask you along that same line.
I can talk about energy and vibration for
Oh, right.
days if
I
you'd
know.
like.
Oh, I know what it was.
Yeah.
It was so you had mentioned a word in your bio, and I'm gonna, put that up with this, talking a little bit about what you do and your coaching and directing people to your website in case they're interested in this reset or any of the groups that you have going on right now. But you mentioned dharma,
Yes.
and you know I've often thought about what I do as a calling, right? That's the term that tends to be used in um, my life, is this idea of calling and what are you called to do, or what's your purpose, and that can seem really lofty, and you know can lead us to sometimes feeling like, oh, I have no purpose, right? So what does dharma mean to you, and how is this part of your dharma to help others help themselves?
I love that you asked this question. I love the concept of dharma. So, in the realm of yoga and Ayurveda, dharma is often described as your soul's purpose. The misunderstanding comes when we believe it only has to do with our work or our job or how we make a living. And it can. But for many people, dharma isn't tied to work or income or anything like that. It's really that unique purpose, I don't even want to say purpose, but almost your soul's uniqueness, what you have that only you can offer to the world, how you can make a difference in only your way. And it may be in how you show up in your job, but also in your family, how you relate to other people. It may be in how you handle conflict. It may be in your sense of humor. It may be in art that you produce. There's no limit to what your unique soul can contribute to this world in your unique way. If we're able to take that and apply it to what we do every single day, even better. If we can apply that to, how we spend our day at work or whatever it is, even better. But some people work for a living and then they express their dharma through a hobby or some other love or form or art or, something that doesn't have to do with their work at all. Now, I also
Is it
believe
similar to passion in that sense?
it taps into, or I should say, passion taps into your dharma, absolutely. But sometimes people will also think, okay, well, then you have just this one dharma, this one purpose, this one gift. But in my theory, your dharma unfolds much like the chapters of a book. And so there may be an overarching theme. And at the end of our life, if we look back and we look at our life like a book, I would, in my mind, think the title of the book will come at the end of our lives, once we know what the book has truly been about. And each chapter is going to have its own title. each chapter may have its own way that our purpose, our gifts are expressed. And then as our life changes, as times change, as we change, there's a train that's going to go by. Our dharma will shift with that. And as we grow, our dharma may take on different facets as well to support who we're becoming next and how that person can contribute to the world.
It's sort of evolving in a sense.
Yes.
Or like instead of a straight line, more of a spiral.
Oh, absolutely. The growth spiral. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So things do evolve in a spiral. If we look at nature, we can see that, the sacred geometry of it. You can easily think of like a fern frond unfurling, right?
Mhm.
There's an easy visual of a spiral in nature, but when we go through things, they may come back around again. That doesn't mean that we have failed. It means that most likely, since we last went through this, since we last experienced this, we've gained experience, knowledge, wisdom, and now we have an opportunity to see this in a different way or approach it in a different way. And that may have something to do with our dharma and many of our challenges. I think it can be helpful if we think of them as growing us into the next version of ourselves or growing us into someone who can contribute to the world in only our own way.
I like that. I like that. Well, and it kind of gets to, so maybe, going back to that idea of letting go of perfection. And so, I can try this, and it makes me more free to experiment and go, oh, well, all right, next time it's going to be.
Yes.
And then we're just sort of ever, being led into that newness.
Yes. And I love that you use the word being led. We also like to, as humans, tell ourselves that we are in control when we really only have control over ourselves, our thoughts, how we respond to the world, the choices that we make. But yes, we also sometimes tend to tell ourselves that we can control the world around us, we can control other people or situations. And so it is that, and that's another yogic teaching, Ishvara Pranidhana, the surrender to the bigger unfolding, the bigger path of things that we don't have control over.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
Right? Because that is very countercultural, I think, that idea of surrendering, which is a little more than letting go. But it's surrendering to something that we can trust, and that it's.
And I think that also ties back to our idea of creating space. It's the closed fist versus the open hand, creating the space for something to come in. All right, I'm gonna take my hands off the wheel, surrender to it, and create the space for something to come in. And that's taking it back to this idea of a reset, even the idea of fasting, creating space so that whatever is to come in next can come in.
Yeah, and that's how I think it really, fits in with religious traditions, right? I mean, they're looking at this idea of renewal, reset, and we don't have to just limit it to one, 40-hour period or 1 week, or I mean, it really does sort of become a lifestyle in that sense of it's gonna change our mindset and our identity. I'm a person that can change.
Absolutely.
I'm a person that can grow. I'm a person that can experience new things or that can do something hard. It's hard to reset. The first time I did it, I think I just talked about letting go because we were moving. I believe it was in a season of we were getting ready to move. And so I was like, oh, okay, I can just talk about letting go of things that we didn't need anymore. And that was, I'm packing up. Um, and then the next time I, found myself in our new home in Ohio, and my family was still transitioning. And so I had a lot of time and space to create my meal plan and do whatever I wanted. So I was like, okay, this time I'm going to do the food part of it. And I think I ate more food during the reset than I eat normally because I was making these delicious meals based off the seasonal food guide. It was
Whole
fabulous.
food, yeah.
And
So nourishing, right?
it was so nourishing, deeply, deeply nourishing to my tissues, and they needed that. And I just really needed that reset. And then I remember someone saying, well, wow, you're just doing so great with the food. I'm like, but I don't have my family here all the time, and my schedule, I can set my schedule. And then I remember the next season as we went back through it, it was totally different.
Yeah.
It was really different because I was in a different place, and my household was in a different place. And so each time we have that opportunity to take on a different piece.
And to be open to whatever it's going to be,
Mm-hmm.
to let it be whatever it's going to be this time around in this season. I will often hear, well, this would be great. This would be so easy if I lived by myself. But, not often reality for many. And so, all right, we're going to see what we can do. I'm going to do one thing this time around, and I'm going to see how it goes. And it can be difficult, and maybe that's part of it too. Just being with the difficulty of it.
Right.
What can we learn from that?
What can we learn from that challenge?
Mm-hmm.
And the resistance that creates with them. I think that's a really, that was a really eye-opening thing for me that time, was just the resistance that it created the third time when I had, my regular schedule and family in town and in the house.
And that can bring up all kinds of thoughts and emotions.
Yeah. Well, and then how does that reflect on our schedules? Because I think coming out of COVID, I was having a lot of conversations with folks about, we were just picking up all the things that we did before and trying to do all of that instead of really sticking to the maybe things we had let go of that felt good to let go of.
Right.
Suddenly there were obligations, and we started picking those things back up.
That's such a good point. COVID in some ways was a major reset. Even though we didn't choose it, there were things that we didn't have access to, or that we couldn't do, couldn't use, couldn't be in. Mm-hmm. And then many coming out of COVID maybe thought, okay, well, we'll just go right back to what it was before. But not all of it actually served us. And so being able to choose, I've created this space, I've let go of things for this short period of time, and now I can choose if I want to add them back in or not.
Yeah, being conscious of that choice.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, this has been great and
so good.
Fun to connect and talk about everything from resetting, lenten fasting, and dharma and life purpose and
energy, all kinds of things.
Yeah, for sure. And we didn't even get into all, the other work that you do with yoga, and you're a musician.
All kinds of things going on over here.
Right. And you've completely changed the way that you lead your groups, I think,
I have
in this season. So
yeah. So reinventing. Definitely. It's that spiral, right? Resetting. Yeah.
All right, Kelly. So here's my big question. I want to know, what are you sipping right now? What are you taking a sip of that is keeping you grounded and helping you to fill your cup?
That's a great question. I would say in the last 6 months, what is really just feeling good for me and like it's right timing for me. The universe has brought into my awareness books and groups and other people that I can learn from about the subconscious mind and what is often referred to as the shadow. So Carl Jung is really best known for his work in the shadow realm, and so I'm feeling so filled up as I'm learning more and more about how our subconscious mind really is in control of everything. And how we can start to become aware of what's going on in the subconscious, how we can heal it, and how we can kind of make friends with it. And so then, of course, I'm sharing that with my group, which also feels good.
Yeah, making friends with the shadow, making friends with
Yes,
what's going on behind our conscious or
yes,
the conscious mind. Yeah, good. Well, more to come on that.
Yes.
So thank you for sitting down with me and with us, with the Earthandcup community, and sharing some of your wisdom and your brilliance and radiance with us, right?
It is my pleasure, my great pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Here's some energy, right? Energy to you and energy to all those who are listening or watching. Thank you. Be well.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Keep shining bright. And I'll see you soon.
Yes.